Not too long ago, I did a video reviewing Dehancer's plugin for Adobe Lightroom. And today we're back with the Dehancer plugin for DaVinci Resolve. Now, I think the coolest part about this plugin for DaVinci Resolve is it's pretty much the exact same as the one for Lightroom. So after getting some practice with the plugin for Lightroom, it's essentially the exact same on here, which means there's not really much else to learn. All right, so let's go ahead and jump straight into the color tab on DaVinci Resolve, and I'll show you exactly how I use this plugin to color grade my footage. All right, so coming over here to the color tab, the first thing I'm gonna do is right here where it says clip, I'm just gonna switch that to the entire timeline. Now, depending on if you wanna edit your clips individually or if you wanna edit the entire timeline, it's completely up to you. And I'm just gonna change that because I usually adjust my color grading for the entire timeline. All right, so the first thing I'm gonna do is add two different nodes. So I'm gonna add one corrector node, and we're just gonna attach that. And then I'm just gonna double click on this and add a serial node after it. So the first node right here is gonna be for basic corrections, things like exposure, contrast, stuff like that. And then the second node is where we're gonna put the Dehancer plugin. Now, I've seen a lot of videos of professional colorists that have got like 10, 20 nodes going at the same time. To be honest with you, as a photographer, I never really go that far in color grading my videos, but this plugin definitely has a lot more potential than what I'm gonna show you here today. All right, so the first thing I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna add a color space transform onto that first module. And because this clip was not shot log, I'm not going to change any of the input color space or gamma or anything like that. I'm just gonna go straight over here to the primary color wheels, and the first thing I'll do is just add a little bit of contrast. Usually bump up the saturation, and usually that's pretty much it. Sometimes I'll go over to HDR, and we can make the shadows a little bit cooler. We can make the highlights a little bit warmer if that's a look that you're into. And then we can go ahead and mess around with the tone curve a little bit just to add more contrast if you want to. And yeah, that's pretty much all I do for the basic corrections. All right, and now what we're gonna do is we're gonna go into this second node right here, and we're going to drag on the Dehancer Pro plugin. Now, something I should mention real quick, if you're working off of a MacBook Air or something like that, then this program is gonna be really, really slow. So definitely edit the entire video first and then add your color correction after, because the rendering is just gonna take forever and your video is gonna play very, very slowly with this color grade on. All right, so this is what the Dehancer interface looks like now that we have that on there. The first thing that we have is input. Now, this clip wasn't shot on log, but if it was shot on log, you'd want the input source to be Rec 709. You can see here we have exposure compensation, temperature compensation, tint, and fringe, and anything under input is going to be like a global edit. So you can see here, this is a global edit. So anything that you do under input is going to affect the entire clip evenly. All right, and moving on down to film. If you've watched my other review of the Adobe Lightroom plugin, then you know that the two main variables when it comes to getting a look with Dehancer comes down to the film stock that you choose and the paper that you print it onto. So right here under film, if you click here on profile, then we have all these different options that you can choose from. And really, when I'm editing my footage, I'll just go through these and pick one that I like. They have a lot of the same film stocks that they have in the Lightroom plugin. So if you like one in your photos, you can use the exact same one here in your videos. And usually I'll just go through some of these and find one that I like and I think fits the mood of the video. All right, I think we're gonna go with Kodak Gold 200. That's a classic film. It's used all the time in real film photography, and it often gives you fantastic results here in Dehancer. Right here under profile where it says push and pull, this is not actually the strength of the filter. This is the exposure. So in real film photography, photographers and videographers will often purposely over or underexpose their image, because unlike digital where exposure just means brighter and darker, in film, depending on how you over or underexpose the film, it actually can affect the contrast and the coloring of the image. So oftentimes they'll purposely over or underexpose in order to get a certain look. All right, moving down to film developer. Here's where we have some contrast boost, gamma correction, color separation, color boost. Now you can do all of these things in this first color grading node just using the built-in DaVinci interface. But if you do it here in the Dehancer plugin, then you're gonna get a lot more authentic film look to it. So usually I'll just bump up the contrast like that, leave the color separation at 100, add in some color boost, and that looks perfect. And also make sure you're always clicking this little toggle to make sure all of your corrections are enabled. All right, under film compression, this is where we have impact. So impact is the amount of impact that your edits are making. So if you go ahead and drag that down, all of a sudden now all the edits that you're making have far less impact on the image. Go ahead and drag it up and your edits have a lot more impact. Right here we have white point, tonal range, and color density. And so this is basically just allowing you to mimic the very wide dynamic range of film, as well as the color density. Film has very dense and rich colors, so you can go ahead and drag that all the way up if you want to mimic that. And then coming right down to expand, this is where you have your black point and white point. So if you go ahead and slide this black point down and slide this white point up like that, you can get a lot more washed out vintage film look, and it just looks a lot more authentic because real film is usually not super contrasty. All right, and coming down to print, this is what I was talking about earlier when I was talking about the two main variables. The first thing we have here is profile, and there's a few different options you can choose from. So this is mimicking the second film stock that the video would be printed onto, right? So in real film videography, they would capture the video on one roll of film and then print it out on a second roll of film. So this is allowing you to choose what kind of film your video is being printed onto. So they have a few options here. Usually what I'll do is I'll go with either the Kodak print film or the Kodak Endura glossy paper. I think that the glossy paper is usually the one that I go with. It just has some nice colors and also a really nice film look without looking too, crazy or over edited. And then they also have exposure, tonal contrast, color density, and saturation. Now we saw all these things before in one of those other modules, but the reason they have it here is because this is affecting the exposure, tonal contrast, and color density of the actual film that it's being printed onto, right? So this is not affecting necessarily the image, but it's affecting the film roll that the image is being printed onto. So we can go ahead and mess around with the exposure, see what looks good, mess around with the tonal contrast, all that kind of stuff. All right, next up is color head. Now, for those of you who are still learning about film, a color head is essentially part of the film process. So because films are negative, when they're developing them, oftentimes they'll introduce certain colors of light into the film. And so basically, the more color they introduce, the more of the opposite you're gonna get in the final product. So for example, you can see we have yellow, blue, magenta, green, and cyan and red sliders. So the more we slide this over to yellow in real film photography, that would give us a much more blue end result. And it's the exact same with all the other sliders. The more of one color you introduce, because film is a negative, you're gonna get the exact opposite in the final product. So, if you introduce a bunch of yellow light, your image is gonna look a lot more blue. If you introduce a bunch of magenta, it's gonna look more green. And then right here, we just have a little toggle that says gang. That just groups all these sliders together so that you can move them all at once. And then right here, we also have shadows tone, midtones, and highlight tones. So this allows you to essentially make the shadows cooler or warmer, make the highlights cooler or warmer, same with the midtones. Usually what I'll do is I'll cool down the shadows and warm up the highlights because I think it just gives a nice color contrast, and I'll just leave the midtones where they are. All right, now we have film grain. Now here they have some grain presets. You can also do this completely custom. You can change things like the size, the amount, the resolution, and you can also make your grain either colored grain or monochromatic grain, because in real film, like I said in the other video, you would never get monochromatic grain in a colored film picture. It'd always be colored grain. So it's really cool that they allow you to do that. Under halation, they also have some presets. Halation is essentially just boosting any light source in the image, giving it kind of a hazy glow effect. You can do it custom or you can do it with their presets. And bloom is essentially the same as halation. It's just further amplifying any light source that you have in your image. Next up, we have film damage. Now they do have some presets. You can also do it custom. I'll very rarely add film damage to a video, but it is here if you want it. They have things like dust, hairs, and scratches, and you can go ahead and put as much or as little of that as you want it. And you can also change the opacity in any film damage that you add. And we also have film breathe. Now film breathe is the amount that the clip is actually moving. So basically in real film, it's just a roll of film that's being pulled through a projector. And so this is just kind of mimicking that, right? Like it's just shaking the video a little bit to make it look like it's a roll of film being pulled through. And we have gate weave, which is essentially the exact same as film breathe. All right, and next up we have overscan. So you can add like a film overscan, you can add negatives, positives. They have some different presets here. And this allows you to basically just make your video look like it was kind of shot on a film camera. I never really use the overscan because I don't really do those kinds of videos, but it's cool to have it. Next up we have vignette. This is a pretty standard vignette, very similar to other editing programs. You can change the exposure either up and down. You can change the size and the feather and the aspect ratio. And again, make sure to click enabled. If you're not seeing your edits show up, it's because that is toggled off. Oftentimes, if I'm trying to get my videos to look a little bit more filmic, I'll actually bump up the exposure and go with like an opposite vignette, and that just gives it kind of a more faded film look. We have monitor. Now monitor is where you can turn on clipping indication. Clipping indication is essentially, it'll show you if your highlights are too blown out or if your shadows are too dark. And this is just to ensure that you're not pushing the image too far in the editing process. And then we have output. This is just one single slider. This just allows you to determine the strength of all the other edits that we just made. You can either drag that down or drag it all the way up and leave it how it was. And right here we have LUT generator. So what you can do is you can actually take all these edits that we just put on this video and you can export it as your very own LUT. So a LUT is essentially just a filter for videos. This allows you to just save all the edits that you just made, and so you can put it on more clips in the future. All right, so options is where you're going to actually import the Dehancer plugin when you download it. Essentially, all you're gonna do is just download it off their website, get the activation key, download that zip file, open it up, and then you're just gonna go right here into options, and you're gonna put that key in, and it'll activate the Dehancer plugin when you buy it. All right guys, and that's exactly how I edit my videos using the Dehancer plugin for DaVinci Resolve. You can see if I go ahead and toggle back and forth, that's the before and this is the after. It just really brings out a lot of character in your footage, allows you to get that kind of cinematic vintage film look that we're all after these days. And it's just a lot of fun to mess around with. But like I said earlier, definitely make your color corrections after the video is already, edited and finished. If you're working on a MacBook Pro or something like that, because this is gonna run really slowly if you make the color corrections before you're done editing. All right guys, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed that video. If you liked it, definitely go check out the other review I did talking about Dehancer's plugin for Adobe Lightroom. That one's perfect for photographers. It's a lot of fun to edit in there and just make my photos look more like film. If you're into filmmaking or photography, I think you're absolutely gonna love Dehancer. I have a discount code linked down in the description if you're interested in buying it, and I will see you in the next one.